The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds of the modest home in Columbus, Ohio, casting golden stripes across the linoleum floor where 3-year-old Sarah sat cross-legged. Beside her, nearly twice her size, lounged Ranger, a formidable Belgian with alert amber eyes that never left the toddler. Sarah's chubby fingers worked meticulously to place a plastic tiara between Ranger's pointed ears, her tongue poking out in concentration. "Hold still, Ranger," she commanded with the authority only a 3-year-old could muster. The trained police K-9, capable of taking down armed suspects on command, instantly freezing in place as if receiving an official order. From the doorway, Officer Michael watched in amazement, coffee mug paused halfway to his lips. His wife Emma slipped beside him, leaning against his shoulder. "Still can't believe it," Michael whispered. "That's the same dog that cornered the Wilson Street gang last week." Emma smiled. "He knows who his real boss is." Their bond had begun the day they brought Sarah home from the hospital. Ranger, then a 2-year-old recent graduate from K-9 training, had approached the infant carrier with cautious curiosity. One sniff of Sarah's newborn scent had transformed the working dog. He'd settled beside her carrier, assuming a protective stance he would maintain for years to come. As Sarah grew from infant to toddler, Ranger adjusted his behavior with remarkable intuition. While fierce and commanding on duty, at home he displayed infinite patience, allowing Sarah to use him as a pillow during movie nights, tolerating clumsy hugs and ear tugs with stoic dignity. The neighbors along Maple Street had grown accustomed to the sight, a little girl in bright mismatched clothes chattering endlessly to the imposing police dog who padded faithfully beside her. Ms., the retired schoolteacher next door, often brought her camera out to capture what she called the most unlikely friendship in Ohio. "That dog understands every word she says," Ms. insisted to anyone who would listen. "Saw him fetch specific toys when she asked. Not just ball or rope, she asked for Mr. Squeaky Giraffe, and he brought the right one." What fascinated Michael most was how Ranger seemed to adjust his behavior depending on Sarah's emotional state. When she was excited, he would engage playfully, allowing her to chase him around the yard. When she was upset, he would lay his head in her lap, remaining perfectly still until her tears subsided. During thunderstorms, he would position himself by her bed before the first rumble of thunder even reached their neighborhood. The Columbus Police Department had taken notice of their special connection. Last month, they'd featured Ranger and Sarah in their community outreach program. The photograph, Sarah in her Junior K-9 handler t-shirt standing proudly beside a sitting Ranger, had been printed in the local paper and hung framed in the precinct hallway. "Their social media gold," Captain had commented during their last department meeting. "People see that little girl with our working dog, it changes perceptions, humanizes the force." What no one could have anticipated was how this bond would soon be tested in ways that would capture hearts far beyond their quiet Columbus suburb. Emma checked her watch. "Michael, you're going to be late for shift." Officer nodded, kneeling to kiss Sarah's forehead. "Be good for Mommy, Princess." Sarah looked up from her tea party, where Ranger now sat with remarkable poise despite wearing both a tiara and a purple tutu around his neck. "Daddy, will you and Ranger catch bad guys today?" Michael ruffled her curls. "That's our job, sweetheart." Ranger's ears perked up at the subtle change in his handler's tone. With gentle care, he extricated himself from Sarah's play setup, shaking off the costume pieces as he moved to Michael's side, instantly transforming from playmate to professional. "Ranger, watch," Sarah commanded firmly. The dog looked back at her, caught between two masters. Michael laughed. "Sorry, kiddo, Daddy trumps Princess commands during work hours." Sarah's lower lip protruded slightly, "but he comes home for dinner." "Always," Michael promised, not knowing how that promise would be challenged before the week's end. "Ranger, say goodbye." On command, the dog returned to Sarah, gently nuzzling her cheek before returning to Michael's side, ready for duty. None of them realized these routine morning goodbyes would soon be replaced by hospital visits and tearful pleas. Their ordinary family life, built around the extraordinary bond between a little girl and a police dog, was about to become a story that would touch hearts across America and change police departments forever. The morning had started like any other for Officer Michael. He dropped a quick kiss on Emma's cheek, ruffled Sarah's curls, and clipped Ranger's lead to his tactical vest. Spring rain pattered against the cruiser windows as they pulled out of the driveway, Sarah waving from behind the living room window with her favorite stuffed dog clutched to her chest. "Just a normal Tuesday," Michael murmured to Ranger in the back seat, the dog alert and ready for their shift. The police radio crackled to life at 10:37 a.m. All units in vicinity of First National on Madison Avenue, silent alarm triggered, possible 211 in progress, suspects reportedly armed. Michael's cruiser was 3 blocks away. "Dispatch, this is K9 Unit 47 responding. Officer and Ranger, ETA 2 minutes. Copy K9 Unit 47. Be advised backup is 5 minutes out. Approach with caution." Michael's training kicked in as he parked a block from the bank, out of sight. "Ranger tight," he commanded, and the Belgian fell into perfect heel position as they approached from the rear alley. Through his earpiece, Michael could hear dispatch updating. 3 suspects, at least 2 firearms identified by security cameras, and 8 civilians inside. The rear door to the bank was slightly ajar, a mistake by the robbers that could give Michael the element of surprise. He radioed his position, voice low. "K9 Unit 47 at rear entrance preparing to enter, requesting status on backup." "Backup still 3 minutes out, SWAT mobilizing." Michael hesitated. Protocol suggested waiting, but each passing second put the hostages at greater risk. "Ranger ready," he whispered. The dog's muscles tensed beneath his protective vest, understanding the gravity in his handler's tone. They slipped inside, into the dim hallway leading to the main floor. Michael could hear raised voices, angry shouts demanding cooperation. He unholstered his weapon, moving silently forward with Ranger, communicating through hand signals now. What happened next would later be pieced together from security footage and witness statements. As Michael reached the doorway to the main floor, one of the bank tellers made a desperate move, triggering the door alarm in an attempt to distract the robbers. The high-pitched wail shattered the tense atmosphere. "Police, drop your weapons," Michael announced, protocol overriding caution as he identified himself. The first suspect panicked, firing wildly toward the sound of Michael's voice. A bullet grazed the officer's shoulder, spinning him against the wall. The second shot would have found its mark in his chest if Ranger hadn't launched forward, a blur of tan fur and focused aggression. The security camera captured Ranger taking down the first gunman, teeth securing a grip on his arm as the weapon clattered away. The second suspect turned his weapon on the dog, but Michael, despite his injury, fired once, a clean shot that sent the man stumbling backward. What none of them saw was the third robber emerging from the bank manager's office. The shot came from behind, catching Michael in the side below his protective vest. He dropped to one knee, returning fire even as blood soaked his uniform. Ranger, hearing his handler's grunt of pain, released the first suspect and pivoted toward the new threat. The third robber aimed at the charging dog, firing twice. The first bullet missed. The second found its mark in Ranger's abdomen, the impact throwing the dog sideways across the polished floor, where he left a smear of crimson as he struggled to regain his footing. Despite his wound, Ranger crawled toward Michael, positioning himself between his fallen handler and the remaining threat. The standoff lasted 17 seconds before the sound of approaching sirens sent the third robber fleeing toward the front entrance, directly into the arms of arriving backup. Officer, first through the door, would later describe the scene in his report. Officer was conscious but losing blood rapidly. K-9 Ranger, despite suffering what appeared to be a critical wound, remained in protective position, refusing to allow anyone near until I gave the proper command codes. 2 ambulances arrived simultaneously, one for human casualties, one equipped for police K-9 emergencies. The paramedics worked quickly, loading Michael onto a stretcher. BP dropping, need immediate transport, one called out. Across the bank floor, the veterinary specialist had her hands full with Ranger. Severe abdominal wound, possible damage to liver and spleen. He's going into shock. As they loaded both partners into separate ambulances, Ranger whined, straining toward Michael despite his injuries. "It's okay, boy," Michael managed, his voice weak. "Good dog." The call to Emma came from Captain himself, his voice grave as he explained that her husband had been shot during a bank robbery response. "He's in surgery now at Mercy General," he said, before adding the detail that would soon break Sarah's heart. Ranger was also hit. They've taken him to Eastern Emergency Veterinary. At home, Emma sank against the wall, phone clutched in trembling fingers, watching Sarah play innocently in the living room with her toys, unaware that both her father and her beloved Ranger were fighting for their lives across town. By nightfall, the story had made local headlines. Officer and K-9 partner critically wounded thwarting bank robbery. The reporter ended the segment with words that would soon prove prophetic. Sources at the police department tell us the specialized veterinary care required may exceed department budgetary provisions for K-9 officers, raising questions about what happens next for this heroic dog. In her bedroom, Sarah clutched Ranger's spare collar to her chest, not fully understanding why her mother's eyes were so red, or why Ranger hadn't come home for dinner as promised. Emma hadn't slept in 36 hours. She moved between 2 hospitals like a ghost, Mercy General, where Michael remained in intensive care after his second surgery, and Eastern Emergency Veterinary Clinic, where Ranger clung to life, stabilized but requiring specialized surgery that the clinic wasn't equipped to perform. The waiting room chair had molded to her form when her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor, Mrs. "Sarah's asking questions I can't answer. News is everywhere. What should I tell her?" Emma closed her eyes, tears slipping beneath her lashes. She'd left Sarah with their elderly neighbor, hoping to shield her daughter from the worst of it until there was something hopeful to share. But Columbus was a mid-sized city where news traveled fast, especially when it involved a police shooting. "I'll be home in 20 minutes, she texted back. When Emma walked through her front door, Sarah launched herself forward, clinging to her mother's legs. "Where's Daddy? Where's Ranger? Mrs. won't tell me." Emma knelt, gathering her daughter into her arms. "How do you explain violence to a 3-year-old? Daddy and Ranger got hurt helping people," she said softly. "The doctors are making them better." Sarah's lower lip trembled. "Can we visit? I could bring Ranger his squeaky giraffe. He always feels better with Mr. Giraffe." "Not yet, sweetheart," Emma whispered, her voice breaking, "but soon." That night, after finally getting Sarah to sleep, Emma received the call that would change everything. Dr. Winters, the veterinary surgeon, spoke carefully. "Mrs. Ranger needs specialized surgery to repair his internal injuries. The procedure costs approximately $15,000, and," she hesitated, "department policy only covers emergency stabilization for K-9s with injuries this severe, not extensive surgical intervention." Emma's knuckles whitened around the phone. "What are you saying?" "The department has to make a decision within 48 hours. Either approve the additional funding or—" Dr. Winters couldn't finish the sentence. "Or what?" Emma demanded, although she already knew. "Or they'll recommend humane euthanasia." The words hung in the darkness of Emma's kitchen. Ranger, who had saved Michael's life, who slept outside Sarah's door during thunderstorms, who had become the beating heart of their family, could be gone because of budget constraints. "That's not happening," Emma said with sudden steel resolve. "Not while there's breath in my body." At 6 a.m., Emma made 2 calls, one to Tors, an attorney friend who specialized in police matters, and another to Michael's partner, Officer. By 8 a.m., had contacted Channel 7 News. By noon, local reporter Washington stood outside Eastern Emergency Veterinary Clinic, microphone in hand. Behind me is where K-9 Officer Ranger, critically wounded in yesterday's bank robbery, fights for his life. Sources within the department tell us that despite Ranger's heroism, which saved his handler's life, budget constraints may prevent him from receiving the surgery he needs. The camera cut to footage had provided Sarah and Ranger at last year's police picnic, the little girl riding on the patient dog's back while Michael watched proudly nearby. Then more recent footage. Sarah sitting beside Mrs. on their front porch, clutching Ranger's spare collar and a worn tennis ball. "I need my Ranger to come home," the toddler said, her voice small but clear. "He's my best friend. He protects me from the monsters and the thunder. Please fix my puppy." By 3 p.m., the story had been picked up by regional networks. By dinner time, it had gone national, with the hashtag #SaveRanger trending across social platforms. The Columbus Police Department's social media accounts were flooded with messages, some supportive, others scathingly critical of the policy that put a price tag on a hero dog's life. Flowers began appearing outside both hospitals. Children sent crayon drawings of Ranger wearing his police vest. A local bakery created dog-shaped cookies with blue icing, donating the proceeds to Ranger's care. Emma's phone rang constantly, childhood friends, strangers from across the country, even celebrities who had seen the story. A local church organized a prayer vigil. The owner of a construction company pledged $1,000. A first-grade class sent an envelope containing $24.37, their entire collective allowance money. By midnight, the hastily established GoFundMe had raised over $10,000. Emma should have felt relieved, but then came another call, this one from Captain. His voice was strained. "Emma, I'm trying to help, but the bureaucracy is complicated. Even with the donations, there's a policy issue. K-9s injured beyond a certain threshold are typically retired from service rather than rehabilitated, especially at Ranger's age." "He's only 5 years old," Emma protested. "I know," sighed, "but the bean counters see it differently. If he's retired, the department contribution ends completely. The surgery, the rehabilitation, it would all fall to you on top of Michael's recovery." Emma sank onto her couch, exhaustion overwhelming her. "So even with all this support?" "There's a hearing tomorrow afternoon. Administrative procedure when significant resources are involved. I've been pushing, but ultimately it's a board decision." After hanging up, Emma checked on Sarah, who had finally fallen asleep clutching Ranger's old training toy. On her nightstand sat the framed photograph of her graduation from the Junior K-9 Handler program, her tiny hand solemnly shaking Ranger's paw while Michael beamed proudly in the background. As dawn broke, Emma made one last desperate call to Tors. "They're having a hearing today to decide Ranger's fate. I need a miracle." The attorney was silent for a moment. "Not a miracle," she finally said. "Just the right emotional appeal. Emma, how would you feel about bringing Sarah to that hearing?" "Bring my 3-year-old to a police administrative hearing? You can't be serious." "I'm deadly serious," Tors replied. "Let them look in the eyes of the little girl who loves that dog. Let them try to explain department policy to her. Sometimes, Emma, the most powerful legal argument isn't about law at all. It's about humanity." As Emma wavered, her phone pinged with a text from Michael's nurse. He was awake and asking for her. She grabbed her keys, hope and determination warring with fear. One way or another, she would fight for her family, all members of it, including the 4-legged hero who had saved her husband's life. Attorney Tor's office smelled of leather-bound law books and coffee as she spread documents across her mahogany desk. The clock read 2:17 a.m., less than 12 hours before the administrative hearing that would determine Ranger's fate. Her eyes burned from reviewing obscure departmental policies and legal precedents, searching for anything that might save the wounded K-9 officer. "There has to be something," she muttered, pushing graying hair from her forehead. Had known the family for years, she'd been Michael's mock trial coach in high school, had attended their wedding, had held Sarah as a newborn. This wasn't just another case, this was family. Her finger paused on a dusty police department procedural manual, section 47.3, Extraordinary Measures for Service Animals. The provision was rarely invoked, created after a police horse had saved multiple officers during a riot in the 1980s. It allowed for special consideration in cases where a service animal demonstrated exceptional valor resulting in the preservation of human life. Reached for her phone. Despite the hour, Emma answered on the first ring. "I found something," said without preamble. "A procedural exception. But Emma, it requires personal testimony establishing Ranger's actions directly saved Michael's life. Do we have that?" Emma's voice was hoarse from exhaustion. "The security footage said it clearly shows Ranger taking the first bullet that would have hit Michael's chest." "That's good, but not enough. We need human testimony, someone who was there." "Michael's still heavily sedated," Emma said, desperation creeping into her voice. "The doctors won't even let him testify by video." Tapped her pen against the desk. "What about the bank manager, or the teller who triggered the alarm?" "I can try to find them," Emma said, doubt evident in her tone. "But the hearing is at 2 this afternoon. That's less than 12 hours from now." "I know, and there's something else," hesitated. "The provision requires the appeal to come from someone with standing, a commanding officer or the handler. Michael can't even sit up." "There's a gray area," continued. "Immediate family members of the handler, especially minor dependents who can establish an ongoing relationship with the service animal." Understanding dawned in Emma's voice. "Sarah." "Yes, it's unusual, I know, but if Sarah were to appear." "You want my 3-year-old daughter to testify at an administrative hearing. She can barely string together complete sentences when she's nervous." "Not testify in the formal sense," clarified. "Just be present. Let the board see her. Sometimes the most powerful legal argument isn't about statutes. It's about putting a human face, especially a small, innocent one, on an otherwise abstract policy decision." Silence stretched across the line before Emma whispered, "I need to think about this." Morning brought no clarity. Emma moved through breakfast preparations mechanically, pouring cereal for Sarah while checking her phone. The GoFundMe had reached $12,000, but the veterinarians needed a decision and payment by end of day. Captain had texted that the administrative board was under pressure from both sides. Community members demanding intervention versus budget hawks citing fiscal responsibility. "Mommy," Sarah's voice broke through Emma's thoughts, "is Ranger coming home today?" Emma looked at her daughter, curls mussed from sleep, eyes wide with innocent hope. "I don't know, sweetheart. Some important people are having a meeting about Ranger today." Sarah nodded solemnly. "To fix his." "Yes," Emma said, throat tight. "To decide about fixing his." Sarah pushed her cereal bowl away. "I want to go to the meeting." Emma froze. "What do you mean?" "If they're talking about Ranger, I should go too. He's my dog too, not just Daddy's." Sarah's chin jutted forward with determination that painfully mirrored Michael's. "I can tell them how good he is." Emma's phone buzzed with a text from Michael's nurse. "He's awake and asking about Ranger. Doctor says 5 minutes, no more." 20 minutes later, Emma stood beside Michael's hospital bed, whispering about's plan while Sarah colored quietly in the corner with crayons provided by a sympathetic nurse. Michael's voice was weak but resolute. Take her. Michael, she's 3. That hearing room will be intimidating. Department officials, lawyers, maybe even press. His fingers tightened around hers. Ranger took a bullet for me, Emma. He's suffering because he did exactly what he was trained to do, protect me. I can't be there to fight for him, but Sarah. His eyes drifted to their daughter. Sarah is braver than you think. But what if it doesn't work? What if they still deny the funding? I don't want her to witness that kind of disappointment. Michael's gaze hardened. Then we'll sell the house if we have to. Ranger is family. At noon, arrived at the home carrying a garment bag. I brought options, she said, unzipping it to reveal several small dresses. Nothing too fancy, we want sympathy, not theatrics. Emma shook her head. This feels like we're exploiting her. We're giving Sarah a chance to help Ranger, which is exactly what she wants, corrected gently. Children have more agency than we often give them credit for. Sarah selected a simple blue dress. As Emma braided her hair, knelt to child height. Sarah, do you remember me? I'm your daddy's friend. Sarah nodded. Today, we're going to a meeting about Ranger. There will be lots of grown-ups there who need to decide if they can help Ranger get better. Would you like to tell them why Ranger should get better? Sarah's eyes widened. Will Ranger be there? Exchanged glances with Emma. We're not sure yet, sweetheart, but you can bring something of his if you want. Sarah immediately ran to her room, returning with Ranger's first collar, the one he'd as a puppy but Michael had saved as a memento. As they prepared to leave, Emma's phone rang. Officer, Emma, I pulled some strings. The vet says we can bring Ranger to the hearing for 5 minutes. They'll have a medical team with him. I thought it might help the board see what they're really deciding. Is that safe for him? Hesitated. The vet says his condition is stable enough for a brief transport, and honestly, Emma, it might be his only chance. The drive to police headquarters was silent except for Sarah's occasional questions. Will Ranger have bandages? Does he have a cone like Mrs. Cat had? Can I hug him or will it hurt his? Parked in the reserved space Captain had arranged. As they approached the imposing brick building, reporters clustered near the entrance, cameras ready. Emma instinctively moved to shield Sarah, but the little girl straightened her shoulders, clutching Ranger's old collar like a talisman. Don't worry, Mommy, she said with startling clarity. I'll be brave for Ranger. Emma blinked back tears as they were escorted through a side entrance, away from the press. Captain met them in a quiet hallway, his expression grave but hopeful. The board's already seated, he said. 5 administrators, including the police commissioner and the city budget director. He knelt to Sarah's level. Hello there, Miss Sarah. Your daddy and Ranger have a lot of friends here today. Sarah studied him seriously. Are you going to fix Ranger? Face softened. We're going to try very hard. As they approached the hearing room, Emma's steps faltered. Through the partially open door, she could see a row of stern-faced officials behind a curved table, files open before them. The room was crowded with officers in uniform, Michael's colleagues showing solidarity. Squeezed Emma's arm reassuringly. Remember, we have the law on our side with Section 47.3. We have the community behind us. And most importantly, she glanced down at Sarah, who was straightening her dress with solemn determination, we have the most compelling advocate possible. The door swung fully open. A hush fell over the room as Emma and Sarah entered, followed by with her briefcase of carefully prepared arguments. All eyes turned to the little girl in the blue dress, clutching a faded puppy collar, ready to fight for her hero with whatever weapons a 3-year-old could muster. Innocence, honesty, and a love uncomplicated by budgets or policies. The administrative hearing room felt cavernous to Sarah, whose tiny hand clutched her mother's with increasing pressure as they walked down the center aisle. The wooden benches on either side were filled with police officers in crisp uniforms, their faces solemn as they watched the little girl pass. Some nodded encouragingly, Others quickly wiped away tears before their colleagues could notice. Emma felt her daughter falter as they approached the front table where had begun setting up her materials. The 5 board members behind the raised dais looked imposingly official. Commissioner Davis with his silver hair and medals, Budget Director Finch with her severe glasses and perpetual frown, Deputy Chiefs Morgan and Washington flanking them, and at the far end, City Attorney, already rifling through a thick binder of policies. "It's okay, sweetheart," Emma whispered, kneeling beside Sarah. "Remember what we practiced. You just sit with me and listen. You only have to say something if you want to." Sarah nodded solemnly, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar room. "Where's Ranger?" she whispered back. "Officer is bringing him soon," Emma assured her, praying the K-9 officer's condition would allow for the brief appearance they'd planned. The room quieted as Commissioner Davis tapped his microphone. "This special administrative hearing of the Columbus Police Department Review Board is now in session," he announced, voice echoing off the high ceiling. "We're here to consider an extraordinary appeal regarding K-9 Officer Ranger, service number K-47, currently in critical condition following injuries sustained in the line of duty." Emma helped Sarah into a chair, placing a small booster seat had thoughtfully brought. Even with the extra height, Sarah could barely see over the table. She clutched Ranger's puppy collar in both hands, running her fingers over the worn leather as if it were a rosary. "Mrs. Commissioner Davis continued, his tone softening slightly as he addressed Emma, "we want to express our sincere gratitude for Officer's service and sacrifice. How is his condition today?" Emma stood, smoothing her skirt nervously. "Stable but critical, Commissioner. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." "Please convey our best wishes," Davis nodded before his expression became more businesslike. "Now, regarding K-9 Officer Ranger. Ms. Torres, I understand you're representing the family in this matter." Rose with practiced confidence. "Yes, Commissioner. We're invoking Section 47.3 of the Departmental Code, Extraordinary Measures for Service Animals." Budget Director Finch's eyebrows shot up. That provision hasn't been used in 20 years. "Nevertheless, it remains valid department policy," countered smoothly. "And Ranger's actions clearly meet the criteria of exceptional valor resulting in the preservation of human life." "We don't dispute the dog's heroism," Finch replied, adjusting her glasses. "But there are fiscal realities to consider. The specialized surgery costs $15,000, with potential rehabilitation expenses exceeding another $10,000. Our annual medical budget for the entire K-9 unit is $50,000. "With respect, Director," interjected, "those fiscal realities didn't stop Ranger from taking a bullet meant for Officer." A murmur of approval rippled through the audience of officers. "Order, please," Commissioner Davis called, though his own expression suggested sympathy with his point. "Ms. Torres, please present your case." Launched into her prepared arguments, methodically walking the board through the security footage that showed Ranger's heroic actions during the bank robbery. She cited 3 previous cases where exceptional medical care had been approved for service animals, though none as expensive as what Ranger required. Sarah fidgeted in her seat, her attention wandering as the adults used words she couldn't understand. Emma noticed her daughter's growing restlessness and slipped a small notepad and crayon from her purse. Sarah immediately began drawing what appeared to be a stick figure girl and a large dog with a badge. As concluded her initial presentation, the hearing room door opened quietly. Officer entered, followed by 2 veterinary technicians carefully guiding a stretcher. On it lay Ranger, heavily bandaged around his midsection, an IV line running to a fluid bag held by one of the techs. Despite his injuries, the dog's ears perked forward, his eyes scanning the room with the alertness that made him an exceptional K-9 officer. A collective intake of breath swept through the room. Several officers stood reflexively, a gesture of respect for a wounded comrade. "Permission to bring K-9 Officer Ranger into the proceedings, sir," requested formally. "The veterinarian has approved a 5-minute appearance." Commissioner Davis nodded wordlessly, emotion briefly overcoming his professional demeanor. Sarah had gone completely still, her crayon frozen mid-stroke as she saw Ranger. "Ranger," she whispered, her voice barely audible, then louder with a trembling edge. "Ranger." The dog's head turned sharply toward her voice, ears fully alert now. A low whine escaped him as he recognized Sarah, and he struggled weakly against his restraints, trying to rise despite his injuries. "Please keep him still," one of the technicians urged. "His stitches." But Ranger was a dog with a mission now. With strength that surprised everyone, he pulled himself up to a sitting position, eyes locked on Sarah across the room. The technicians moved quickly to support him rather than restrain him, recognizing the futility of trying to hold back a determined Belgian, even an injured one. Emma felt Sarah's hand slip from hers as her daughter slid from the booster seat. "Sarah, wait," she began, but touched her arm gently. "Let her," the attorney murmured. "This is exactly what needs to happen." Sarah approached the stretcher slowly, her tiny sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. The room had gone completely silent, every eye following the 3-year-old's determined path toward her wounded friend. When she reached Ranger, she stopped just short of touching him, suddenly uncertain. "Is it okay?" she asked, looking up at Officer with wide, serious eyes. "I don't want to hurt his." Knelt beside her. "You can touch his head, honey, just be very gentle." Sarah nodded and carefully placed her small hand on Ranger's muzzle. The dog immediately leaned into her touch, his tail thumping weakly against the stretcher. With her other hand, she held up the puppy collar she'd been clutching throughout the proceedings. "Look, Ranger," she said softly, "I brought your baby collar from when you were little like me." Ranger nuzzled her hand, then gave it a gentle lick. A tear slipped down Sarah's cheek as she stroked his fur with the delicate touch only a child who truly loves an animal can manage. From the dais, Budget Director Finch cleared her throat, visibly affected despite her earlier fiscal concerns. "Ms. Torres, I presume this demonstration is part of your appeal." "This isn't a demonstration, Director Finch. This is reality, the reality of what your budget decision will affect. Sarah isn't just officer daughter, she's part of a K-9 handler's family. These bonds aren't line items in a spreadsheet." Commissioner Davis leaned forward. "Sarah," he called gently, "would you like to tell us about Ranger?" Emma started to rise, to explain that her 3-year-old couldn't possibly address such a formal gathering, but Sarah turned toward the dais with unexpected composure. "He's my best friend," she said simply, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "He sleeps outside my door when the thunder is scary. He finds my shoes when they're lost. He saved my daddy." Her lower lip trembled slightly. "Please don't let him die." The raw emotion of a child's plea hung in the air, more powerful than any legal argument could have crafted. Several board members looked down at their papers, struggling to maintain professional detachment. In the audience, hardened police officers wiped away tears without shame. Commissioner Davis cleared his throat. "Thank you, Sarah. Would you like to stay with Ranger while we continue?" Sarah nodded, settling cross-legged on the floor beside the stretcher, her hand never leaving Ranger's fur. The dog's eyes, though clouded with pain, remained fixed on her, as if drawing strength from her presence. As the proceedings continued around them, presenting community fundraising numbers, Budget Director Finch raising concerns about precedent, Sarah remained in her own world with Ranger, whispering secrets only he could hear, promises that everything would be okay, that they would play fetch again soon. What nobody in the room could have predicted was what would happen next, the moment that would transform this administrative hearing from a bureaucratic process into something that would capture hearts across America. The administrative hearing had stretched into its 3rd hour. Torres had presented every legal argument available, citing precedents and policies with meticulous precision. Budget Director Finch had countered with fiscal concerns and potential precedent-setting implications. Through it all, Sarah had remained beside Ranger's stretcher, her small hand resting on his fur, occasionally whispering reassurances only the dog could hear. "The veterinary team needs to return Officer Ranger to the clinic soon," Commissioner Davis announced, checking his watch. "Before we move to deliberation, does anyone else wish to speak?" Emma glanced at her daughter, who had been remarkably patient throughout the proceedings. Sarah's face showed signs of fatigue, her usual nap time long past, but her determination remained unwavering. Emma made a split-second decision. "Commissioner, my daughter would like to address the board." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Commissioner Davis leaned forward, his expression gentle. "Of course, Mrs. Sarah, would you like to come forward?" Sarah nodded solemnly, giving Ranger's ear one final gentle stroke before allowing her mother to guide her to the podium. The wooden stand towered above her, designed for adults rather than 3-year-olds. Officer quickly stepped forward, bringing the booster seat from their table. Even with the added height, only Sarah's eyes and the top of her head were visible above the podium. The sight, a tiny girl facing the intimidating row of officials, created an immediate hush in the room. Several officers shifted uncomfortably, the David versus Goliath visual impossible to ignore. Emma leaned down to whisper, "Just say what's in your heart, sweetheart." Sarah nodded, gripping the edges of the podium with small fingers. She looked first at Commissioner Davis, then slowly down the line of board members, making eye contact with each one as Michael had taught her to do when meeting new people. When she reached Budget Director Finch, she paused, studying the woman's severe expression with the unfiltered curiosity only a child could display. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Emma was about to step in when Sarah finally spoke. "My daddy says," she began, her voice tiny but clear in the silent room, "that police officers help people who need help." She paused, gathering her thoughts with visible concentration. Behind her, Ranger whined softly from his stretcher, as if encouraging her. "Ranger is a police officer too," Sarah continued, the slight lisp in her pronunciation of officer, making several board members smile despite themselves. "He has a badge just like Daddy, and he's hurt because he was helping people." She turned to look at Ranger, then back at the board. "When I get hurt, like when I fell off the swing, Daddy and Mommy make it better. They don't say it costs too many dollars." Budget Director Finch flinched visibly at the innocent rebuke. Deputy Chief Washington covered a smile with his hand. Sarah took a deep breath, her chest puffing out with the effort of speaking to so many adults. "Ranger is my hero," she said, each word deliberate and distinct. "He saves people. He saved my daddy, and heroes get helped when they're hurt. That's the rules." The simple moral clarity of her statement hung in the air. Commissioner Davis cleared his throat, clearly moved. "Thank you, Sarah. That was very—" But Sarah wasn't finished. She reached into the pocket of her blue dress and pulled out something small and shiny, Ranger's first commendation medal, which Michael kept in a display case at home. "This is Ranger's special star," she explained, holding it up for all to see. "Daddy says he got it for being brave." She placed it carefully on the podium. "Maybe you can use it to help pay the doctor. It's very special, so it's probably worth a lot." The gesture, a child offering her most precious treasure to save her beloved dog, broke something open in the room. Officer turned away, shoulders shaking slightly. Torres pressed her knuckles against her mouth, legal arguments forgotten in the face of such pure sacrifice. "That's very generous, Sarah," Commissioner Davis said, his official tone cracking with emotion. "But I think your daddy would want Ranger to keep his medal. He earned it." Sarah considered this, then nodded seriously. "Okay, but please fix him. He's not just a dog, he's—" She struggled to find the right word, her 3-year-old vocabulary reaching its limits. Finally, with perfect simplicity, she said, "He's family." With that, Sarah stepped down from the booster seat and walked back toward Ranger's stretcher. The veterinary technicians, who had been increasingly anxious about keeping the injured dog out too long, exchanged glances. One of them whispered to Officer, who nodded and approached the dais. "Commissioner, I'm sorry, but the medical team insists we need to return Ranger to the clinic now." Commissioner Davis nodded. "Of course, we'll reconvene in 15 minutes too." He was interrupted by a sudden commotion at Ranger's stretcher. Despite the technician's efforts to keep him still, the Belgian had struggled to his feet on the narrow surface. His legs trembled with the effort, the bandages around his abdomen showing concerning spots of fresh blood, but his focus was unwavering, locked on Sarah as she approached. "Please, he needs to lie down," one technician urged, attempting to gently restrain the dog. But Ranger had made a decision. With deliberate movement that spoke of extreme effort, he lowered himself from the stretcher to the floor. The assembled officers gasped as the wounded dog dragged himself forward, one excruciating step at a time, toward Sarah. Emma moved instinctively to protect her daughter but caught her arm. "Wait," she whispered. Sarah stood perfectly still, watching Ranger's painful progress toward her. The distance was perhaps 10 feet, but for the injured dog, it might as well have been miles. Each step visibly cost him, but his determination never wavered. The room had gone completely silent except for the click of Ranger's nails on the polished floor and his labored breathing. Not a single person moved to interfere. Something profound was happening, something that transcended normal protocol. When Ranger finally reached Sarah, he did something that brought tears to the eyes of even the most stoic officers present. With trembling legs, he lowered his head and gently, deliberately, pressed his muzzle against her small hand, the traditional K9 gesture of submission and loyalty to a handler. Sarah, understanding instinctively what even some of the adults missed, placed her other hand on the top of Ranger's head. "My hero," she whispered, loud enough for the microphones to pick up in the silent room. "My hero." Ranger's legs finally gave out, and he collapsed at her feet, his mission accomplished. He rested his head against her shoes, looking up at her with complete devotion. Sarah knelt beside him, wrapping her arms gently around his neck in a careful hug. "It's okay," she told him. "You can rest now. They're going to make you all better." Emma wasn't sure who started applauding first. Perhaps it was Officer, or maybe one of the veterinary technicians. But within seconds, the entire room had erupted in applause, officers standing in unison, many openly wiping away tears. Commissioner Davis stood as well, visibly moved. He glanced at his fellow board members, receiving nods from all, even Budget Director Finch, whose usual stern expression had given way to something much softer. "I believe," Commissioner Davis announced over the continuing applause, "that we don't need to deliberate after all." The veterinary team moved forward to carefully lift Ranger back onto the stretcher. This time, he didn't resist, allowing them to reposition his IV and check his bandages. His eyes, however, never left Sarah. "Officer," Commissioner Davis called, "please inform the veterinary clinic to proceed with all necessary treatments for K9 Officer Ranger, effective immediately. The department will cover all costs." He glanced at Budget Director Finch, who nodded in confirmation. "And let's make sure Officer gets the video of what just happened here. I think he'd want to see it." As Ranger was wheeled toward the door, Sarah maintained contact with him until the last possible moment, her fingers trailing along his fur. "Bye, Ranger," she called softly. "Get better fast." The dog's tail thumped once against the stretcher in response, a promise. Gathered her unused legal documents, smiling broadly. "Counselor," Commissioner Davis called to her, "I don't think I've ever been so thoroughly out-argued in my career." Grinned, glancing at Sarah. Neither have I, Commissioner. Neither have I. Mitchell had been a courthouse videographer for 17 years, documenting everything from mundane traffic violations to high-profile murder trials. She prided herself on maintaining professional detachment, focusing on framing and lighting rather than the human drama unfolding before her lens. But as she reviewed the footage she'd captured that afternoon in hearing room 4, her hands trembled on the editing controls. "You've got to see this," she told her supervisor, sliding the preliminary cut across his desk. "I've never captured anything like it." Within hours, the Columbus Police Department's Media Relations Office received an unprecedented deluge of requests. The carefully edited 5-minute clip, showing Sarah's simple testimony, her offer of Ranger's medal, and the wounded dog's painful journey to her side, had been shared internally among police personnel and their families. Someone, perhaps an officer's spouse or child, had posted it to social media with the caption, "This is what loyalty looks like. My hero saved Ranger." By midnight, the clip had been viewed 2.3 million times. Emma awoke at 5 a.m. to the persistent buzzing of her phone. Bleary-eyed, she checked the screen. 37 missed calls, 119 text messages, and email notifications numbering in the hundreds. Confused and alarmed, she opened the most recent text from Tors. "Turn on Channel 7 now." Emma fumbled for the remote, careful not to wake Sarah, who had finally fallen asleep after the emotional exhaustion of the hearing. The television flickered to life, showing a familiar scene. Her daughter kneeling beside Ranger on the hearing room floor, the words "my hero" clearly audible despite the child's whisper. "The video that's breaking America's heart this morning," announced the morning anchor, her voice softening, "shows 3-year-old Sarah and her father's police dog, Ranger, during an administrative hearing yesterday. The K-9 officer was critically wounded during the same bank robbery that injured the child's father." The segment cut to various social media reactions. Celebrities had begun sharing the clip with their millions of followers. A famous action movie star had tweeted, "More courage in this little girl and her dog than in most of my movie characters. True heroes." A chart-topping singer promised a benefit concert for police K-9 programs. Politicians from both sides of the aisle shared the video with rare bipartisan sentiment about service, sacrifice, and innocence. Emma's phone rang again. This time she answered, hearing's excited voice. "Emma, are you seeing this? It's everywhere." "I don't understand," Emma said, still processing. "How did this happen?" "The courthouse video is public record," explained. "But this is something else entirely. The timing, the pure emotion of it, it's touching something in people." By the time Sarah wandered into the living room an hour later, rubbing sleep from her eyes, the hashtags #MyHero and RangersHuman were trending nationwide. Emma had given up answering her phone, instructing to field media requests. Mrs. stood guard at their front door, turning away reporters with protective fierceness. "Mommy, why is our house on TV?" Sarah asked, pointing to the news van visible through the living room window. Before Emma could formulate a child-appropriate explanation, her phone rang again, this time from Mercy General Hospital. Michael was awake and asking about the commotion. Apparently, nurses had been showing him clips on their phones. "He's coherent enough to understand what's happening," the nurse told Emma. "And he's asking for his phone, says he wants to see the full video." At Eastern Emergency Veterinary Clinic, Dr. Winters moved briskly between treatment rooms, barking orders at staff with newfound authority. The clinic's phone lines had jammed from the volume of calls, donations, well wishes, offers of specialized equipment. An anonymous donor had covered not just Ranger's surgery, but established a fund for all future K-9 injuries in the Columbus department. "His vitals are stabilizing," she informed officer who hadn't left the clinic since returning with Ranger. "We're scheduling the surgery for noon. I've got specialists flying in from Chicago." Nodded, scrolling through his phone with disbelief. "Doc, you should see this. There are kids across the country setting up lemonade stands for Ranger, Elementary schools are holding penny drives. A toy company is talking about making a ranger stuffed animal with proceeds going to police K-9 foundations. Dr. Winters smiled as she checked Ranger's IV. Well, he'll need something to chew on during recovery. Might as well be his own merchandise. At the Columbus Police Department headquarters, Commissioner Davis faced a wall of reporters, flanked by the mayor and police chief. The press conference had been hastily arranged in response to the national attention. "We are deeply moved by the outpouring of support for K-9 Officer Ranger and the family," Davis stated, his usual bureaucratic tone softened by genuine emotion. "The department is proud to announce the establishment of the Ranger Initiative, a comprehensive program ensuring that no service animal will ever face euthanasia due to budget constraints." A reporter raised her hand. "Commissioner, what about the little girl, Sarah? How is she handling all this attention?" Davis glanced at his notes, prepared for the question. "The family has requested privacy during this overwhelming time. We ask that media respect their space, particularly given Officer ongoing recovery." Across town, Sarah remained blissfully unaware of her newfound fame, contentedly arranging stuffed animals in her bedroom. Emma watched from the doorway, marveling at her daughter's resilience and the extraordinary chain of events her simple words had triggered. Arrived shortly before noon, carrying printouts of emails and social media posts too significant to ignore. "The governor called," she said, settling at the kitchen table. "He wants to establish a statewide program modeled after Columbus's new K-9 medical initiative. They're calling it Sarah's Law." Emma sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "This is insane. She's 3 years old, she just wanted her dog to get better." "That's exactly why it's resonating," replied, sliding a particular printout across the table. "Look at this." It was an editorial from a major newspaper, titled "The Wisdom of Innocence." The writer reflected on how a child's moral clarity, the simple conviction that those who protect us deserve protection in return, had cut through bureaucratic constraints and budget considerations to reveal a fundamental truth that adults had somehow forgotten. "She's becoming a symbol," Emma said uneasily. Nodded. "People are looking for uncomplicated goodness right now. Sarah and Ranger gave them that." She paused, tapping another document. "There's more. Children's book publishers are calling, documentary filmmakers, child advocacy groups want Sarah as a spokesperson." "No," Emma said firmly. "Absolutely not. She's a child, not a brand." "I agree completely," assured her. "But there are ways to channel this attention positively without exploiting Sarah." She outlined a strategy: limited, carefully controlled public appearances, preservation of Sarah's privacy, and direction of proceeds to foundations benefiting both service animals and children of injured officers. As they discussed options, Emma's phone lit up with a text from the hospital. Michael had been upgraded to stable condition. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about his recovery timeline. At 2:47 p.m., Dr. Winters called from the surgical suite. "Mrs.," she said, her voice tired but triumphant, "Ranger's surgery was successful. We removed the bullet fragments and repaired the internal damage. His prognosis is very good." Emma closed her eyes, tears of relief slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you. When can Sarah see him?" "He'll need intensive care for at least a week," the veterinarian cautioned. "But perhaps we could arrange a brief video call tomorrow. I think it would be good for both of them." By evening, the video had been viewed over 50 million times globally. It had been subtitled in 27 languages, analyzed by body language experts, and featured on major network specials. Child psychologists praised Sarah's emotional intelligence. Animal behaviorists marveled at Ranger's determination to reach her despite his injuries. As Emma tucked Sarah into bed that night, the little girl asked the question Emma had been dreading. "Mommy, why are people taking our picture?" Emma sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. "Remember yesterday when you told those important people why Ranger should get better?" Sarah nodded, clutching her stuffed dog. "Well, a lot of people saw you being brave with Ranger, and it made them feel happy and hopeful. Sometimes people need to be reminded of the good things in life, like how much you love Ranger and how much he loves you." Sarah considered this, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. "Is Ranger famous now?" Emma smiled, brushing curls from her daughter's forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, Ranger is famous now." "Good," Sarah said decisively, "because he's a hero, and everybody should know about heroes." As Sarah drifted to sleep, Emma checked her phone one last time. A new message from Michael included a link to a petition with over 2 million signatures, calling for national legislation to protect and support service animals. The subject line read simply, "Look what our daughter did." Outside, the last news van finally departed, but Emma knew this was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more requests, more opportunities and challenges. Their private family story had become public property, transformed into something larger than themselves. For better or worse, a 3-year-old's 2 simple words, "my hero," had awakened something in a divided nation's collective consciousness, reminding adults of truths that children understand instinctively. Loyalty deserves loyalty in return, love transcends species, and sometimes the smallest voices speak the most powerful truths. Retry 6 months passed like a whirlwind. Autumn leaves gave way to winter snow, which melted into spring blossoms across Columbus. For the family, these months marked a journey of healing, adaptation, and unexpected purpose. On a bright May morning, Officer Michael stood in the bathroom of their home, adjusting his dress uniform with careful precision. His movements were slower than before the shooting. Physical therapy had restored most functions, but certain motions still triggered twinges from the healed wounds. The department had offered him a desk position, but after much consideration, he'd chosen to return to limited field duty with Ranger by his side. "Need help with those buttons?" Emma asked, appearing in the doorway. 6 months of stress had added strands of silver to her hair, but her smile had returned to full strength. "Almost got it," Michael replied, fastening his collar. "How's our celebrity doing?" Emma rolled her eyes at the term, though it wasn't entirely inaccurate. "Sarah's in the backyard with Ranger, practicing their routine. She's made him wear that little graduation cap 3 times already." Today marked the official dedication of the Sarah K9 Medical Center, a state-of-the-art facility built with corporate donations, government grants, and thousands of small contributions from across the country. The center would provide specialized care for police and service animals throughout the Midwest, with a training program for veterinarians focusing on tactical injuries. Michael followed Emma to the back door, where they paused to watch their daughter through the window. At nearly 4 years old now, Sarah had grown an inch taller, her vocabulary expanding daily. Some things, however, remained unchanged, like her devoted relationship with Ranger. The Belgian had made a remarkable recovery. His sleek coat now covered the scars from his surgeries, and while he occasionally favored his left side during strenuous activity, his strength and agility had largely returned. The department had officially modified his status, still an active K9 officer, but now also formally recognized as the family pet, a rare dual designation that reflected his unique circumstances. In the backyard, Sarah stood with perfect posture, pointing to various objects while Ranger sat attentively. "And this is where you sit when they give you your special award," she instructed seriously, indicating a spot beside a small podium she'd constructed from cardboard boxes. "She's been rehearsing all week," Emma said softly. "I don't think she fully understands what today means, but she knows it's important." Michael nodded, throat tight with emotion. "She understands more than we give her credit for, always has." The ceremony at the new medical center attracted dignitaries from across the state: the governor, state representatives, police chiefs from neighboring jurisdictions, and a representative from the Federal Law Enforcement Division. More meaningful to the family were the ordinary citizens who lined the streets, families with children holding hand-drawn signs of Ranger, K-9 officers with their dogs standing at attention, veterans with service animals offering salutes as the family's police escort passed. The story of Sarah and Ranger had transcended its viral moment to become something enduring, a symbol of the bonds between humans and service animals, a testament to the impact one small voice could have when speaking simple truth. The medical center itself stood as a physical manifestation of that impact, a sprawling single-story building with glass walls and a central courtyard designed for rehabilitation exercises. The surgical suites contained equipment rivaling human hospitals. Recovery rooms featured sleeping accommodations for handlers to remain with their partners. A memorial garden honored service animals lost in the line of duty, with Ranger's name conspicuously absent, a victory in itself. As the family arrived, Sarah clutched her mother's hand, momentarily overwhelmed by the crowd. Ranger, walking beside Michael on a ceremonial leash rather than his usual working lead, moved slightly closer to the child, his body language signaling protective awareness. "There are a lot of people," Sarah whispered, her earlier confidence wavering. Michael knelt beside her, mindful of his still tender injuries. "Remember what we practiced. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. Just standing with Ranger is enough." Sarah nodded solemnly, then squared her tiny shoulders. "I'm ready, Daddy." The ceremony began with speeches, politicians praising the initiative, veterinarians explaining the center's capabilities, police officials emphasizing the value of their K-9 partners. Throughout it all, Sarah sat patiently in the front row between her parents, occasionally reaching down to stroke Ranger's fur when her attention began to wander. Commissioner Davis approached the podium for the final address. 6 months ago, in a hearing room that had seen countless budget discussions and policy debates, something remarkable happened, he began, his official tone softening with genuine emotion. "A little girl reminded us of a fundamental truth, that loyalty deserves loyalty in return." He gestured toward the family. "Today, we dedicate this center not just to providing medical care for service animals, but to preserving the spirit of what has become known as Sarah's Law, the principle that those who protect us deserve our protection in return, regardless of species." The commissioner turned toward Sarah. "And now, I'd like to invite Sarah and K-9 Officer Ranger to help us cut the ribbon and officially open the center." Emma smoothed Sarah's dress, a new blue one with tiny embroidered police badges along the hem, made by a local seamstress who had followed their story. Michael adjusted Ranger's special ceremonial vest, emblazoned with Sarah's guardian in silver thread. Together, the unlikely pair approached the ribbon stretched across the center's entrance. An aide handed Sarah a comically large pair of scissors, modified with extra handles so both she and Commissioner Davis could hold them together. "Ready, Officer Ranger?" Sarah asked her companion, who sat perfectly at attention beside her. The crowd chuckled at the formal address, but Michael recognized it as more than childish play acting. In Sarah's mind, Ranger's title had always been as real and important as his father's. With ceremonial precision, Sarah and the commissioner cut the ribbon. Applause erupted as photographers captured the moment, a moment that would appear on morning news programs across the country, in police training materials, and eventually in a children's book titled My Hero, that would inspire a generation of young readers. What the cameras didn't capture was what happened next, a private moment as the crowd moved inside for the reception. Sarah knelt beside Ranger, wrapping her arms around his neck in a gentle hug. "We did it," she whispered into his fur. "Now all the police puppies will get fixed when they have." Ranger responded with a soft whine and a gentle lick to her cheek, his dark eyes reflecting understanding that transcended human language. Later that evening, As the family drove home from the exhausting day of ceremonies and interviews, Sarah fell asleep in her car seat, still clutching the small plaque she'd been presented Honorary K-9 Handler. It read, with her name engraved beneath. "Did you see the announcement about the federal bill?" Emma asked quietly, mindful of their sleeping daughter. Michael nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. "The Service Animal Protection Act already has bipartisan support. They're saying it could pass by year's end," Emma continued, "all because of one little girl and her dog." Michael glanced in the mirror at Sarah, peaceful in sleep, and then at Ranger, alert in the back compartment, eternally on duty even during the quiet drive home. "Not just any little girl and dog," he corrected gently. As they turned onto their street, they noticed the changes that had become their new normal. The occasional tour van pointing out the famous Ranger's house. The handmade cards still appearing in their mailbox from children across the country. The security detail discreetly monitoring from a distance. Their private life had become partly public, their family story woven into a larger narrative about courage, loyalty, and the wisdom of children. There had been adjustments, boundaries established, privacy fiercely guarded when necessary, offers declined when they felt exploitative. But they had also embraced their unexpected platform, channeling attention toward causes that mattered. Support for families of injured officers, advocacy for service animal protection, programs bringing therapy dogs to children in hospitals. As Michael pulled into their driveway, he noticed a small package on their porch, likely another gift from a well-wisher. These arrived weekly now, despite their requests for donations to the medical center instead. Emma followed his gaze and smiled resignedly. "At least the camera crews have stopped camping on the lawn," she murmured. "Small mercies," Michael agreed, putting the car in park. In the back seat, Sarah stirred, blinking sleepily. "Are we home?" "Yes, Princess, we're home." "Can Ranger sleep in my room tonight?" she asked, a frequent request since both their recoveries. Michael and Emma exchanged glances, their usual rule momentarily suspended. "Just for tonight," Emma agreed. "It's been a big day." As they settled into their evening routine, dinner, bath time for Sarah, medications for Michael, fresh water, and a brushing for Ranger, the extraordinary nature of their journey faded into comfortable domesticity. Tomorrow would bring more attention, more opportunities, more responsibility as reluctant symbols of a movement they had never intended to start. But tonight, they were simply a family healing together, finding new patterns after trauma, moving forward one day at a time. Later, as Michael checked on Sarah before bed, he found her already asleep, one arm flung around Ranger, who lay beside her bed rather than on it, ever the professional even in his devotion. The dog's eyes met Michael's in the darkness, alert and watchful even in repose. "Good boy," Michael whispered. "Stand down, officer, I've got the watch now." Ranger sighed deeply but didn't move, maintaining his protective position beside the little girl who had saved him with 2 simple words and unwavering love. The little girl who, without intending to, had changed police departments nationwide and reminded adults of truths they had somehow forgotten along the way. Outside, a gentle spring rain began to fall, washing away the last remnants of winter and nourishing new beginnings, for a family, for a community, and for service animals across the country who would now receive the care and recognition they had always deserved.